Islam is one of the world's largest religions, with over 2 billion followers across various cultures and backgrounds. Despite its prominence, there are many misconceptions about its teachings, not only among non-Muslims, but also within the Muslim community itself. These misunderstandings can stem from cultural influences, misinformation, or a lack of deep study of Islamic sources. While some misconceptions are perpetuated by external narratives, others arise when Muslims themselves fail to distinguish between religious teachings and societal traditions. This leads to confusion about fundamental aspects of faith, practice, and values. Understanding Islam correctly is essential for both personal spiritual growth and fostering harmony in society. Many Muslims unknowingly hold on to beliefs or practices that contradict the true essence of Islam. Some assume that certain cultural norms represent religious obligations, while others misinterpret Quranic verses or prophetic traditions. These misunderstandings can affect personal faith, family dynamics, and even interactions with the broader world. For instance, many believe that Islam allows violence as a means of spreading its message, when in reality, the religion calls for peace, justice, and the protection of all human beings. Similarly, some assume that Islam restricts women's rights, not realizing that the religion granted women rights to education, property, and inheritance at a time when such rights were unheard of. Another common error is the belief that jihad solely refers to warfare, ignoring its deeper meaning of self-improvement and striving for good. These misconceptions, whether minor or significant, impact how Muslims practice their faith and how others perceive them. By addressing these misunderstandings, we can move closer to a clearer, more authentic understanding of Islam. In this video, we will explore 10 common misconceptions that many Muslims have about their own religion, shedding light on what Islam truly teaches. One of the most persistent misconceptions, even among some Muslims, is the belief that Islam permits or encourages violence. This misunderstanding often arises from a selective reading of Quranic verses, misinformation, or the actions of extremist groups that claim to represent Islam. While it is true that certain verses in the Quran discuss warfare, these verses are often taken out of context, ignoring the historical circumstances in which they were revealed. Many Muslims fail to recognize that Islam, at its core, is a religion of peace, emphasizing justice, mercy, and compassion. The Quran repeatedly discourages aggression and emphasizes that taking an innocent life is equivalent to killing all of humanity. When addressing the issue of conflict, the Quran mandates that war is only permitted in self-defense and never as an act of unprovoked aggression. Throughout Islamic history, the Prophet Muhammad exemplified peaceful resolutions, choosing diplomacy over conflict whenever possible. He established treaties with non-Muslim communities, forgave his enemies, and consistently emphasized patience and forgiveness. Unfortunately, some Muslims may believe that acts of violence or hostility towards others are justified in the name of Islam. This not only contradicts the core teachings of the Quran, but also distorts the prophetic example. Islam strictly prohibits harming innocent people, targeting civilians, or spreading fear and chaos. The actions of a minority who commit violence in the name of Islam should never be mistaken as a reflection of the religion itself. True Islamic teachings encourage kindness, fairness, and the preservation of life. By understanding the full context of Quranic teachings and the example set by the Prophet, Muslims can recognize that Islam is not a religion of violence, but one that upholds peace, justice, and the dignity of all human beings. A common misconception, even among some Muslims, is the belief that Islam supports terrorism or that violent acts committed in the name of religion are justified. This misunderstanding is often fueled by extremist groups that claim to act on behalf of Islam, as well as the media's focus on acts of violence involving individuals who identify as Muslims. However, the reality is that Islam explicitly condemns terrorism, and any form of harm or oppression against innocent people is considered a grave sin. The Quran strongly prohibits unjust killing, stating that the murder of one innocent soul is equivalent to killing all of humanity. While Islam permits self-defense under specific conditions, it never endorses acts of terror, indiscriminate violence, or attacks on civilians. The teachings of the Prophet Muhammad further reinforce this stance, as he repeatedly instructed his followers to avoid harming women, children, the elderly, and even trees and animals during times of conflict. His emphasis on mercy and justice directly contradicts the ideologies of those who promote violence in Islam's name. Muslim scholars and leaders around the world have consistently condemned terrorism, reaffirming that such acts have no place in Islamic teachings. Documents like the Aman Message and the Declaration of Islamic Scholars emphasize that only legitimate religious authorities can make rulings on issues like armed conflict, and that acts of terrorism violate the fundamental principles of Islam. Furthermore, many Muslim-majority countries actively combat extremism, implementing educational programs and initiatives to counter radical ideologies. The association between Islam and terrorism is not only misleading, but also dangerous, as it fosters fear, discrimination, and misunderstanding. It is essential for Muslims to recognize that their faith stands for peace and justice, and that those who commit acts of terror are acting against the very essence of Islam. A widespread misconception, even among some Muslims, is the belief that Islam oppresses women or views them as inferior to men. This misunderstanding often arises from cultural practices that have been wrongly associated with Islam, as well as the misinterpretation of religious texts. While some societies have restricted women's rights in the name of religion, Islam itself grants women numerous rights and emphasizes their dignity, education, and independence. From its inception, Islam provided women with rights that were groundbreaking for the time. Women were granted the right to own property, inherit wealth, receive an education, and engage in business. The first wife of Prophet Muhammad, Khadijah, was a successful businesswoman who managed her own trade empire. The Prophet himself emphasized the importance of education for both men and women, stating that seeking knowledge is an obligation for every Muslim, regardless of gender. Islam also establishes clear guidelines for women's protection and personal autonomy, ensuring that they cannot be forced into marriage and that they have the right to seek divorce if necessary. Unfortunately, some Muslim communities continue to uphold practices that restrict women's freedoms, confusing cultural traditions with religious obligations. Practices such as forced marriage, female genital mutilation, and the denial of education to women are not part of Islam, but rather cultural customs that predate Islamic teachings. The Quran explicitly states that men and women are spiritual equals, and their worth is determined by righteousness rather than gender. Islam does not oppress women. Rather, it provides them with rights and protections that were revolutionary at the time of its revelation. When understood correctly, Islam promotes a balance of responsibilities and rights, ensuring justice and respect for both men and women. The true teachings of Islam empower women and encourage them to contribute to society with knowledge, dignity, and confidence. A common misunderstanding, even among some Muslims, is the belief that the God of Islam is different from the God worshipped by Jews and Christians. This misconception often stems from the use of the Arabic word Allah, which some assume refers to a separate deity exclusive to Islam. In reality, Allah simply means the God in Arabic, and is the same term used by Arabic-speaking Christians and Jews when referring to God. Islam teaches that there is only one God, the creator of all existence, who is the same deity worshipped by followers of previous Abrahamic faiths. The Quran explicitly acknowledges the shared spiritual lineage of Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, emphasizing that God sent prophets throughout history to guide humanity. Among these prophets are Adam, Noah, Abraham, Moses, and Jesus, all of whom are recognized in Islamic teachings as messengers of the same divine being. The Quran provides a clear and concise description of God's nature, stating that He is one, eternal, and beyond human comparison. This aligns with the monotheistic teachings found in both the Torah and the Bible. Islam does not introduce a new deity, but rather reaffirms the fundamental principle of monotheism that has existed since the time of Prophet Abraham. Despite this theological connection, differences in religious beliefs and practices have sometimes led to confusion about whether Muslims, Christians, and Jews worship the same God. However, at the core of their faiths, all three traditions acknowledge the existence of a single, all-powerful creator. The distinction lies not in the identity of God, but in the interpretations of his attributes and messages. Understanding this common ground can foster greater respect and unity among people of different faiths, highlighting the shared spiritual heritage that connects them. Many people, including some Muslims, mistakenly believe that jihad means holy war and is primarily associated with violence and armed conflict. This misconception is often fueled by media portrayals and the misuse of the term by extremists. In reality, jihad is a much broader concept in Islam that refers to a struggle or effort in the way of God, encompassing both personal and communal aspects of life. The primary and most important form of jihad is the personal struggle against one's own weaknesses, temptations, and negative influences. This includes striving to improve one's character, maintaining patience in difficult times, and committing to acts of kindness, honesty, and justice. It is a spiritual and moral effort aimed at self-improvement and closeness to God. In some cases, jihad can refer to a physical struggle, but only under strict conditions. The Quran permits self-defense if Muslims are attacked or persecuted, but it strictly prohibits aggression and harm to innocent people. Even in times of war, Islam has clear ethical guidelines that forbid targeting civilians, destroying property, or using violence as a means of spreading faith. The misunderstanding of jihad has led to the false belief that Islam promotes violence, when in reality, it encourages discipline, self-restraint, and peaceful efforts to establish justice. Understanding the true meaning of jihad allows Muslims to appreciate its role in self-betterment and community service, rather than associating it solely with conflict. Some people, including certain Muslims, believe that Islam is inherently opposed to democracy and that the religion only supports authoritarian rule. This misconception arises from the assumption that Islamic teachings do not allow for governance based on public participation or consultation. In reality, Islam promotes justice, accountability, and collective decision-making, which align with democratic principles. The Quran emphasizes the concept of shura, or mutual consultation, as an essential part of leadership and governance. The Prophet Muhammad himself practiced shura by seeking advice from his companions on important matters, demonstrating the value of collective input in decision-making. Islamic history also provides examples of early Muslim leaders who governed through consultation and sought the well-being of their communities. While some Muslim-majority countries have authoritarian governments, this is not a reflection of Islamic teachings, but rather political and historical circumstances. Many other Muslim-majority nations have democratic systems where leaders are chosen through elections, laws are debated, and public opinion plays a role in governance. The idea that Islam rejects democracy is based more on political interpretations than on religious doctrine. Islamic governance is rooted in justice, equality, and responsibility, principles that can coexist with democratic structures. A just society in Islam is one that upholds the rights of individuals, promotes social welfare, and ensures accountability of leaders. Rather than being incompatible with democracy, Islam provides a moral framework that encourages fairness, consultation, and the protection of people's rights, all of which are fundamental to democratic governance. A common misconception, even among some Muslims, is the belief that Islam rejects Jesus or does not acknowledge his significance. In reality, Jesus, known as Isa in Arabic, is one of the most revered prophets in Islam. The Quran mentions him multiple times, emphasizing his miraculous birth, his role as a messenger of God, and his ability to perform miracles by God's permission. In fact, an entire chapter in the Quran, Surah Maryam, is dedicated to his mother, Mary, further highlighting his importance. Muslims believe that Jesus was born to the Virgin Mary through divine intervention, making his birth unique and miraculous. They also recognize his ability to heal the sick, restore sight to the blind, and even bring the dead back to life, all acts performed through the power of God. However, unlike Christian doctrine, Islam does not consider Jesus to be the Son of God or part of a divine trinity. Instead, he is seen as a noble prophet who conveyed God's message to the people of his time. Another key difference is that while Christianity teaches that Jesus was crucified and resurrected, Islam states that he was not crucified, but was instead raised to heaven by God. Muslims believe that Jesus will return before the day of judgment to restore justice and truth. This shared reverence for Jesus between Islam and Christianity serves as a bridge for mutual understanding, demonstrating that Islam does not reject Jesus, but honors him as a beloved prophet and servant of God. Many people, including some Muslims, mistakenly believe that all Muslims are Arabs, or that Islam is primarily an Arab religion. This misconception arises because the Quran was revealed in Arabic, and the early history of Islam is centered in the Arabian Peninsula. However, the vast majority of the world's Muslims are not Arabs, and Islam is a global religion that transcends ethnic and cultural boundaries. The largest Muslim populations are found in countries outside the Arab world. Indonesia has the highest number of Muslims, followed by Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh. There are also significant Muslim communities in Africa, Europe, and the Americas. While Arabic remains the language of the Quran and is used in prayers, most Muslims around the world do not speak Arabic as their native language. Instead, they read translations of the Quran in their own languages while maintaining the original Arabic for worship. Islam teaches that faith is not tied to any specific ethnicity or nationality. The Quran emphasizes that all human beings are created equal, and that the only distinction between people is their righteousness and character, not their race or cultural background. The early Muslim community was diverse, including people of various ethnicities and backgrounds who embraced Islam based on belief rather than ethnicity. Understanding that Islam is not an Arab religion helps break stereotypes and highlights the inclusivity of the faith. Muslims come from all corners of the world, and their shared beliefs unite them, regardless of their linguistic, cultural, or ethnic differences. Some people, including certain Muslims, mistakenly believe that Islam is a relatively new religion that began with the Prophet Muhammad in the 7th century. This misconception overlooks the fundamental Islamic teaching that Islam is not a new religion, but rather a continuation of the same monotheistic faith revealed to earlier prophets, including Adam, Noah, Abraham, Moses, and Jesus. Islam teaches that all prophets were sent with the same core message: to worship one God and live a life of righteousness. The Quran describes Islam as the original and final form of divine guidance, emphasizing that it is not a separate or new faith, but a restoration of the true teachings that had been altered or forgotten over time. The name Islam, which means submission to God, reflects this universal principle. Muslims believe that Prophet Muhammad was the last in a long line of prophets, bringing the final revelation to humanity in the form of the Quran, which confirms and clarifies the teachings found in earlier scriptures like the Torah and the Gospel. Islam's connection to the past is evident in its rituals and beliefs. Muslims pray facing the Kaaba in Mecca, which is believed to have been built by Prophet Abraham and his son Ishmael. The Hajj pilgrimage follows the footsteps of Abraham's family. Recognizing Islam as part of a continuous religious tradition helps deepen the understanding that it is not a new faith, but the completion of God's message that has been delivered to humanity throughout history. A common misconception, even among some Muslims, is the belief that Islam promotes hatred toward non-Muslims. This misunderstanding arises from misinterpretations of certain Quranic verses, cultural influences, and the actions of extremist groups who claim to represent Islam. In reality, Islam teaches respect, kindness, and fairness toward all people, regardless of their faith, ethnicity, or background. The Quran repeatedly emphasizes the importance of treating others with justice and compassion, stating that there is no superiority based on race or nationality, but rather on righteousness and good conduct. Prophet Muhammad himself set the best example of how Muslims should interact with people of other faiths. He engaged in trade, formed treaties, and maintained friendly relationships with Jews, Christians, and even those who opposed him. He emphasized good character, honesty, and respect in dealings with non-Muslims, instructing his followers to be fair and just in their interactions. One of his well-known teachings states that a true believer is someone from whom others feel safe, both in words and actions. Islam encourages peaceful coexistence and mutual understanding. The Quran explicitly states that there should be no compulsion in religion and that people should engage with others through wisdom and kind words. The idea that Muslims are commanded to hate non-Muslims is not only false, but also contradicts the fundamental teachings of the faith. Islam promotes love, unity, and respect among all people, urging Muslims to build bridges rather than create divisions based on religious differences. Misconceptions about Islam, even among Muslims, can lead to confusion, misunderstanding, and unnecessary division. Many of these misunderstandings stem from a lack of knowledge, cultural influences, or misinterpretations of religious texts. By addressing these common misconceptions, it becomes clear that Islam is a religion based on peace, justice, equality, and compassion. It does not promote violence, oppression, or hatred, but instead calls for understanding, patience, and respect for all people. Recognizing the truth behind these issues allows Muslims to practice their faith with confidence and clarity, while also fostering better relationships with those of different beliefs. Islam is a continuation of the divine message that has been sent to humanity throughout history, emphasizing moral character and righteousness above all else. By seeking knowledge and understanding the true teachings of Islam, Muslims can correct these misconceptions and live in a way that reflects the beauty and wisdom of their faith. I hope this video helped clear up some common misconceptions about Islam. If you found this insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Islamic Insights for more content on faith, history, and spirituality. Let's continue learning and growing together. Until next time, take care and may peace be upon you.